I don't think I've ever reviewed a Legacy game before, and it makes sense, because they're kind of hard to review. Hi, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co., and I did review Divinus. Divinus from Lucky Duck Games. I did review that one, to be fair. That's one I covered on the channel, but I only played 2 games, so it made it a little easier of a conversation. Contrasted with Jurassic World, Legacy of Isla Nublar, which is a game that I'm currently 7 games into at the moment. 7 out of 12. Now, I did hope to actually play all 12 games before reviewing this, but I didn't. And we'll get into why, and honestly, it's a good thing that I didn't. I'll give you more context to that. So, Jurassic World. This is a game currently on Kickstarter. This is a prototype. You can go ahead and check that out. I'll have a link down below, and we'll talk about everything from the game, my experience with it. This is going to be completely spoiler-free, or at least as completely spoiler-free past the wide amounts of information that are very known about the game. We'll talk about it, but spoiler-free. Don't worry. You can watch this safely. Hopefully. I'll edit things out if I screw up, but we'll figure it out. This is from Funko Games. This is currently on Kickstarter. This is not a cheap game either, and we will touch upon that. I will first talk about my experience, my opinion, some context. I'll talk about price at the end, because I think it's expensive enough that it's hard to talk about this game without addressing the price. At the same time, I'm 7 games into this experience, and by the way, I'll be showing you nothing. So if you're hoping to see visuals and stuff, nothing, because my map is so marked up with stuff that is no way on earth that you're allowed to see. I could show you the starting characters and dinosaurs that I played with, but everything else is secret. Everything else is unlocked. There was no practical way for me to show you everything you would need to see to properly, well, see stuff. Hence my little comment at the beginning about how Legacy games are hard to review. But I will talk about it with as much context as possible. So let me give you some brief overview, some brief background, and then let's launch into all the stuff. 3 minutes into the video, of course. So, Jurassic World is a Legacy game. It's a Legacy game that plays out across 12 games, a tutorial followed by 11 scenarios, followed by the theoretical idea of infinite play after, something many Legacy games have done, and we'll talk about my opinion of that as well, my opinion having not yet finished the game. It's a Legacy game that is a cooperative one. You're going to be playing together to try to maintain the balance of Jurassic Park. You're going to be going through a bunch of scenarios, the tutorial scenario plus 11 more scenarios, having more and more consequences, permanent changes to the gameplay as you go. You're going to be permanently building things and adjusting the park you live in. You're going to be unlocking dinosaurs, choosing which dinosaurs enter the park. You're going to be unlocking characters and developing and upgrading certain characters in certain ways. There's a whole lot of ways that you're going to spend your budget every single round, and they're going to have ongoing increasing ramifications to the way your park is laid out. And yes, 7 games in, I absolutely regret many of the placement choices I have made in the first few games. In each of these games, you're going to have 5 rounds of play. There's going to be 5 rounds of play, and then every sector in the park, there's going to be 20 zones and 6 sectors. A zone is a grouping of 2 to 4 sectors generally, and then a sector is an individual spot. You're going to have 20 individual spots, sections on the board, divided into 6 different zones. Every zone has a behavior card associated with it, such that when you scout in a zone, when you search in a zone, you're both going to be drawing item cards from a deck, but also unveiling what dinosaurs are going to be doing that round in that zone, allowing you to react and prepare accordingly, which is important because, like I said in the beginning, to a certain extent, your job is to maintain the balance of Jurassic Park, to ensure that you don't get eaten, that's bad for you, to ensure that park staff or whatnot, or guests, or any number of the various things that will show up across the course of your games, to ensure they don't get eaten, to make sure that you're accomplishing various round goals, because if you don't, you're going to be taking consequences every single round, and then also to ensure the dinosaurs don't get eaten as well. You might sit there and think, it's okay if the T-Rex and the Raptors tear themselves apart, they're just the carnivores and they're the baddies. The problem is you actually are trying to maintain balance, and so it is okay if they tear each other apart, but you will take 2 consequences. Consequences are tokens that range between 0 and 2. There's 1, 0, 1, 2, and a whole bunch of 1s, and if you ever have a total of 5 consequences summed up in your park, you lose the game. Otherwise, your goal is to accomplish a variety of objectives across those 5 rounds, and yes, you need to last until the end of that 5th round, so it's not good enough to simply get things done. You have to get things done and survive across those 5 rounds of play. Now, in every single round, you will have a total of 9 actions. 9 times 5, that's 45 actions across the entire game. Not per character, total. So if you're playing with 3 characters, you're going to divide that up into 3 actions per character. If you're playing with 2 characters, you have 4 actions per character, plus a action that can be used for any character. And if you're playing with 4 characters, you play with 2 actions per character, and then a bonus action that can be used for every character. 45 actions to accomplish all your objectives, to keep things in check, to herd the dinosaurs, controlling them, moving them around, to research the dinosaurs, which is arguably the closest thing we've had to spoilers so far. I'm not going to take that out. It's the most minor spoilers as far as actions you can take. But there are a lot of things that are happening in this game. There are a lot of things to be mindful of, and there are a lot of unlocks. The core concept is you're going to have little mini-games in the shape of buildings. You're going to have a bunch of buildings that go down the board, each giving you mini-games of how to manage things, and then the mini-games have certain objectives as far as configurations or things you need to do. So you need to move your characters around, you need to enter buildings, you need to take building actions, and you're doing all this, again, being mindful that you have 45 total actions to win or lose a scenario. Depending on what happens at the end of the scenario, you go to the next one. You never replay a scenario, you just move confidently to the next one, but whether you win or lose will have an impact on how much harder or easier the game gets. You're going to unlock things every scenario depending on what happened in the last scenario. You're also going to have various bonuses or benefits that will help you along the way if you lost. Rinse and repeat across, for me so far, 7 games out of 12, and theoretically 12 total games as you go through it, which I chose not to because I'm enjoying the game. With context, there's going to be plenty of things I talk about as far as complaints, plenty of things as far as reasons why this game may not be for you, and we will get into all of that, but the overall reason why I stopped at 7 games as opposed to powering through this is timeline and my enjoyment of the game. You see, I got this game a week ago. I have played 7 games in 7 days, which is not necessarily that much, but I have a lot of other things going on in my life too. I have jobs and stuff, and kids and family, and other games I need to play, and schedules. And I could have theoretically tried to power through another 5 games in the past 2 days. But I got up to a certain point where I realized that I was going through this too quickly. I was powering through it too quickly. And my choices were threefold. I could either take my time, play those 12 games, and then put out this review then when I'm finished. The problem with that is that would that would inherently be after the Kickstarter was over, and it would not give you necessarily the information you might be looking for as to why you're watching this now in the next, today, the next 2 days before the Kickstarter ends. Option 2 is I could power through those remaining games and just get them done, and I could. The problem is I was getting to a point in my gameplays that I realized that going through this quickly, which is already the fastest I've played any other Legacy game, would to a certain extent affect my experience. Taking the same actions again and again and again and again and again and again in a 7-day period, taking 12 games in a 7-day period, it was starting to affect my enjoyment of the game, and I realized I liked the game enough that I want to fully experience those last 5 games. And so that's option 2 is what we're doing now. Option 2 would have been powering through it and hurting my experience, which I didn't want to do. Option 3 is what I'm doing now, which is just play 7 games, call it a day, and give you an opinion now. At some point, in some way, shape, or form, talk about how my opinion has changed. Probably not a full dedicated video. I'll figure that stuff out. Maybe I'll throw a link down below to something where I finish the experience out and fully talk about it. Well, still spoiler-free, but how things have changed in the last 5 games. And I think there's a very strong chance things will change. Just for context, I can tell you that my opinion of the game has changed multiple times as I went through those 7 games so far. You see, the very first game of Jurassic World, which the one you've probably seen many gameplays of, Dice Tower has a gameplay, Becca Scott has a gameplay, Game Night from Board Game Geek has a gameplay, Man vs. Meeple had coverage, but I don't think they had a gameplay, Tantrum House had coverage, but I don't think a gameplay. So there's a bunch of gameplays out there, a bunch of coverage out there of the game, and you've probably seen that first game played multiple times in multiple ways, which is great. Except not so much at the same time, because it probably gave you the most basic sense of how this game plays. The most basic sense, absolutely basic. You take a few actions, there's no complexity, there's no nuance, there's no depth, and also, because it's the tutorial scenario, there's no meaningful impact and lasting change, which is my favorite part of Legacy games. That first tutorial is risk-free. You can play it again and again and again until you get a feel for how the game plays. In our case, we played it once, and then we dove into it. But that first scenario is really simple, really easy, really straightforward, and does not represent what Jurassic World will show you as you continue to play. And so that's a good thing because you can see the components, you can see the map, you can see the layout, and then you can get a sense of the gameplay. But it's a bad thing because it may have given you the wrong sense of the game, and it's a sense that I walked into Game 1 feeling, hey, this was fun, not worth playing, but this is fun, but I'm intrigued to see where it goes. Once you start going to scenarios 2 and 3 and you start unlocking more stuff, the game starts opening up a bit. What starts off with the first 2 scenarios being ridiculously easy, I'm sure your experience will vary, but our experience was ridiculously easy. We got through it, we had no issues whatsoever. I think Game 4 was the first game we lost. Game 6 might have been the second game we lost. We've only lost twice now, but our margins were, the first 2 games were laughably easy. The rest of the games, we have won most of them, lost 2 of them, but every single one felt incredibly close. Every single one felt incredibly tight, and that's a good thing. It gives me that balance I look for in cooperative games, where every single time I won, I felt like I could have lost, and the 2 games we lost, I felt like I could have won. Most of the games have had us coming in by the skin of our teeth, which is an expression that I've never understood and still don't understand, but I still say it, and then I question why it exists. That's our difficulty aspect of the game. There's a lot of things I like about the game, and this is where we start drifting into my normal review format of the things I like, don't like, where I am with it. Although, if we're doing our regular review format, let's start off with ease of play. The rules of Jurassic Park, Jurassic World, are very easy to dive into. They're a little bit lengthy as opposed to teaching somebody the game, which is easier, but it's fairly easy to dive into. They have this nice little note card thing where you can store new rules as they come out. That's very useful in terms of being able to access the rules as you go, because everything it's basically an index. You can just say, what is herding? And then you pull open the card, you flip to the H, and you find the rule, and it's very accessible. It's very useful in terms of what it's doing. There's a lot of text. There's a lot of text to go over, and things change a lot between the games as well, so there's a lot of stuff to learn. But overall, I would say the rules have been fairly comprehensive, fairly quick and clean to go through. Table space in the game does get large. That's something that's been a factor for sure. The basic map is not small, plus you have a variety of building maps off to the side, plus you have your characters, plus you have tons of tokens, plus, and this is one thing I really didn't like, is you kind of have these little comic books that show you the objectives you have to achieve, which is very cute and very helpful for setup and all that, but then you have this fully opened comic book to show you the objectives, and it just takes up an extra degree of table space. There's no clean way that it lies on the table. It takes up a decent amount of table space. Not the end of the world, but, you know, it's a thing. As far as maintenance between games, because this is something that in particular has been a pet peeve of mine when it comes to other games, there's a decent amount of maintenance going on in Jurassic World. Now, maintenance being all the stuff that you have to do when you finish the game, all the stuff you scratch off, all the packages you open, all the things you apply to change the game state in the beginning of the game, at the end of the game. There's a decent amount of maintenance. Reading those 7 new rule cards you just unlocked, like, oh my gosh, you're reading 7 new cards, full index-sized cards, full of rules because you just opened the next scenario. There's a lot of in-between time to the game. I believe the game is rated as being 90 to 120 minutes per scenario. I can't speak for the last 5. I would say my general impression has been probably 60 to 75 minutes per game in terms of the game time of an actual game, as far as the first 7 scenarios. And then another half an hour or so of cleanup, and maybe 20 minutes, I'd say closer to half an hour of cleanup in between games, between the starting part of the game and the ending part. Meaning you'll spend 10 minutes at the start of every game spending your budget, figuring out what you can do with all the fun things, and that is fun. That part's fun, I'll give it that. But the 20 minutes at the end of each game as you take care of all the maintenance stuff, it's fun adjacent. I don't mind it, I don't, and I'm happy that it separates it out to be between games as opposed to during games, which is my preferred way. When a Legacy game is throwing a whole bunch of stuff at you, I like it when it's all in a single shot, and it is. It's at the beginning and the end of a game. None of the important, giant reveals and changes to the game state are happening mid-game. So that's a plus there as far as that. But again, the 90 to 120 minutes, my own experiences, 60 to 75 minutes of game time, 25 to 30 minutes of maintenance per game. Fun adjacent maintenance, so not pure work, but still maintenance. As far as player count, this is a 1 to 4 player game. I have played this solo and 2 players so far. In terms of controlling the characters, I've done everything from 2, 3, and 4 characters at a time. Meaning I've controlled 2 characters, I've controlled 3 characters, and I've controlled 4 characters in this game. So we've done all the controlling characters as far as the way that changes the play experience. And I've played it both solo, just myself, and then most of the games were myself and my wife. Just the last game was solo, just because I want to get some more done, and also because I want to get a feel for how it changes the experience. I will say that I personally think 3 is my favorite character count. in terms of where I'm at. Controlling 2 characters felt like you didn't have as much spread around the park, and controlling 4 characters felt like you were a little more restricted on the number of actions you were taking, and the wasted actions as you did things like moving around the park, where you have to move all your characters. Those things get easier and different as the game goes on, but this moves into spoiler territory, so I won't heavily engage in that. But I will say all character counts, 2, 3, and 4 were fine. Playing it both solo and with another person were fine in different ways. I prefer the camaraderie of having another player at the table making decisions with me, but I also was able to min-max some difficult situations playing it solo because I just was able to focus without worrying about having a good time. And I mean, it's a good time for me, but it's like, okay, if I do this and if I spend those 4 actions, I can move this, adjust that, do this, I think I got this. So there's a degree of ability to overly focus on the min-maxing when I was playing it solo. So all the character counts, player counts, were all enjoyable. Again, all player counts is just 1 and 2 players. Character counts with 2, 3, and 4. As far as what I liked, didn't like, and can see others not liking, which I've touched upon in various ways, but let's go into it a bit more. So, there's a lot of changes between games. That's both a pro and a con, frankly. The changes between games means at no point, and this is relevant to My City, another Legacy game from Maria Knizia that has like 24 games, I think it was. I think it's 24 games to My City, a whole lot of games. That one of the relevances of My City is My City, I found, was it 24 or 48? It was a lot of games, whatever it was. But My City was a game that didn't necessarily have a ton of changes game to game. Okay, I think it was 24 games. But it didn't necessarily have a ton of changes game to game. A lot of small things were changed here and there, but you felt like you'd go through these arcs of several games being similar, which is fine for a regular game, but for a Legacy game where you're kind of driving through things, I think I like having that accelerated change because it keeps me invested in all the stuff that's happening, and stuff was frequently happening. Game 1 to Game 2 did not have a lot of changes. Maybe, I think Game 5 to Game 6 didn't have a lot of changes. Everything else had a significant number of changes going on, particularly, I'm not going to say particularly, I'll let you discover that on your own. A lot of things, there were a lot of changes, a lot of envelopes, a lot of packages being opened, a lot of new stuff that kept you intrigued as to all the new things you got, all the new stuff you got, all the stuff you want. This is useless, I can't say things. All the stuff. I'm trying to like figure out a way of saying all the stuff you unlocked without saying the stuff you unlocked, and I can't do that. There was a lot of changes between games, and I like that aspect. The fan service and nostalgia in this game is absolutely huge. It's absolutely huge. I mean, the amount of moments, from the way your objectives are structured, from... I can't say things. There's a lot of fan service and nostalgia. If you're someone who's a fan of the Jurassic books, the IPs, Jurassic Park or World IPs, whether the movies, the books, whatever it is, maybe the Lego Netflix show, I have no idea, I never watched it, but there's a lot of fan service for the IP stuff. If you like this for what the IP represents, the intellectual property of Jurassic Park, I think you'll be very happy with all the various references you get across anything from just cards, to notes, to comments, to objectives, to characters. There's a whole lot of stuff there. The difficulty scaled nicely. Now, again, the first 2 games I felt were really easy. My wife and I, after our first 2 games, were like, this is fun, but also, we're never going to lose this game. And then in Game 3 or 4, whatever it was, we lost it, and then we stopped talking as much, and we started playing more, and then it just became a constant, difficult adjustment to actually win or lose. We still win most of our games, but it feels close no matter what we do. The building out of the island. Very rewarding. Again, I can't go into heavy detail here, but I generally like when I feel like I'm building my map, when the world we are living in, when the world we are engaged in is something that we have created. And this game absolutely has that in spades. The amount of permanent changes you're making, for better and for worse, the amount of times you'll sit there and look at, I wish I had done this here and built that there and adjusted this here, I wish I'd taken that into account. If only I could do it all over again. But you can't, because it's a Legacy game. And so this sense of ownership over the board that you are creating is very strong in this game. Some Legacy games have it more than others. This one definitely has that in a very strong sense. And those mostly sum up the main aspects that I really enjoy about the game. I'm sure there's other aspects I can touch upon. I'm just trying to be mindful of what I say and don't say. This is the part where I'm going to complain about a bunch of stuff. And I'm going to complain about things. Don't walk away thinking that I don't enjoy the game. I do, but I will complain about those things, and I'm going to be a little harsh about some of these things, specifically because price is a factor on this one. So to start off with, the amount of characters is a pro and a con, because there's a lot of playable characters in this game. In fact, if you back it on Kickstarter, I believe they just unlocked Blue, the dinosaur, as a playable character, so that's something you get on Kickstarter only, not in the retail copy. There's a lot of playable characters, which is great for the sense of, of the IP, of honoring the IP, of showing you all that stuff that you want. It's great for the sense of having variety. It's not as great for the sense of character development. You see, characters have these things you can unlock as the game goes on. They have these different impacts. We're not going to heavily get into the hows and whys, but there's stuff you can unlock on characters, and the wide amount of characters makes it so that it's harder to like really build an investment to certain characters. You're constantly changing them out. You're not able to fully invest into the character development of a single character. Again, it's fine. It works, and the further I progress in the game, the more I'm starting to get those upgrades here and there that really help me flesh it out. But it's certainly, I didn't have the sense of attachment to a character the way I did, let's say, in Pandemic Legacy. When I play Pandemic Legacy and I upgrade a single character and I finally have more characters and I'm like, no, I want this character. I don't have that sense here. So that's a small little nitpick there. The 5-round limit, the 45 actions you have, feels very limiting in the game. Especially because a lot of the stuff you have to do in the game feels like busy work. A lot of stuff you have to do feels like maintenance that you have to manage and not fun decisions you have to figure out. There are epic moments in this game. Epic moments. I don't know how I can... Epic might be a little intense. There are really solid moments in this game where I feel like I just did something very cool, where I navigated a position, where I got a dinosaur to do something and go somewhere and do stuff. I know this is useless. I can't... It's a Legacy game. There are very solid moments in this game that were very, very enjoyable. But I would say at any given point, if I'm making a guess, out of the 45 actions you take in a game, somewhere between 20 to 20, somewhere between 20 and to 30 of them are just maintenance. The aspect of moving because you have to get from one location to another. The aspect of blank, 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 so that you can blank, blank, blank because the blank, blank is moving along the blank and you have to get the blank back. Okay, so if you played the game, you probably know a little bit more what I'm saying, but that's a huge aspect. It just feels like a lot of work to blank the blank back. And so that's tediousness. Some of the main building minigames sometimes feel a bit like a puzzle, but other times feel like busy work. And so again, there's a lot of busy work from the moving, the maintenance, the buildings, the minigames, all these things. Sometimes you're doing a lot of fun things. Other times you are engaged in a larger degree of busy work than I would ideally like. Less so of feeling clever and more so of feeling like you just have to get something done, like the tediousness is there. And the minigames to a certain extent do get old quickly. Now, keep in mind that I've played this game 7 times in 7 days, and I specifically slowed down because of that feeling. Because some of the minigames were feeling like they were getting repetitive, I was like, I could just continue powering through, but I don't want to do that to myself. I want to enjoy the game, and some of these aspects feel more repetitive and more maintenance and more busy work when you're playing all the games in such a condensed time frame. So while it is one of the bigger things I did not like about the game, I think it's also biased by my experience of powering through this as fast as possible. So hopefully that's a little bit of context there. As far as some other complaints that are not necessarily relevant to me, but may be factors for you, there are huge swings of luck in the game. Huge swings of luck, like absolutely huge swings of luck, left, right, and center. To the point that I cheated in one game. I'm not proud of myself, but I did cheat. I'll explain. I don't even know if I could explain without going into spoiler territory. But I reset something just because of how bafflingly bad luck something was in the beginning of my 7th game. Just in the beginning of the 7th game, I was like, that is so statistically not likely. I'm just resetting and starting again the 7th game. It was easy, no big deal. No one got hurt. Maybe my sense of pride and self-worth, but that's about it. But there's lots of degrees of luck in the game. There's how dinosaurs activate, the way those cards are going to activate. There's the concept of ambushing, where a dinosaur will pop up on one of the 20 squares of the island randomly if they have nothing to attack. This is a core basic rule, no spoilers here. But if a dinosaur has nothing to attack, they just ambush. You roll a 20-sided die, they pop up in zone 17, which is the one zone you were like, they should not pop up in. That is the one zone. So there's ambushing. There's the way the building puzzles are set up. You see those little mini games you're playing? They often have a default setup and then an objective. Sometimes the randomized setup of the building is very, very close to your objective, and other times it makes the game nearly unwinnable, because rather than taking 3 actions to get what you want, you're going to have to take 8. And the difference between 3 and 8 when you only have 45 actions the entire game is so crippling, and the way the buildings have this aspect of moving from room to room means the difference between 3 and 8 might actually be the difference between 3 and 15, because you have to also intersperse those actions with movements around the zone. There's a lot of huge amounts of luck. The items you get, there's which items you get in the game. There's this concept of of the item deck, and as the item deck gets larger, as you unlock things, which is one of the fun things in the game, the ability to unlock stuff in an order of your choosing, which is great. But that also means you get these cool items that are really useful, and then they go into the item deck, and you may never see them, or they may show up in your opening draw. And the difference between the ability to use certain items, which I'm not going to say any of them because I don't remember which ones are starting items, which ones you unlock, but the ability to have certain items in your starting hand can be hugely impactful, and in other games you'll never get them at all, and so that's a huge swing as well. The weather, which is something that is a little bit spoilery, but not really because it's printed on the cards, but all the zone cards have something called weather on them. There's a weather icon. You won't know what that weather icon does until you start playing further into the game, and I'm not going to ruin it for you. But the weather, let's just say weather, has an impact, and the randomization of those cards can be a huge impact, can have a huge impact on the game state as well. So there's just large degrees of swinginess to the game that for the most part don't affect my opinion of the game, because I'm willing to cheat when it gets that ridiculously crazy. It only happened one time I cheated, but for the most part it's fine. I don't mind losing, I don't mind winning, I don't mind whatever. All that stuff is fine, and it adds to the chaos of the experience. But if you don't want a legacy game that will have large amounts of luck affecting your experience, this might not be for you. This does have a large amount of luck around a variety of aspects to the game that will really change things up. I think that's most of the stuff that I can hit off the bat. But a note on continuous play, meaning the idea that you'll continue playing it after you're done with your 12 games. I don't think I will. Now, I haven't finished yet, so factor that in, but I have not finished the game yet. My opinion of the game so far is, we'll get this in final thoughts shortly, is fairly strong with caveats, but I don't think it's strong enough to have me continue playing this game after I'm done. It still has the aspects that, and I'm not confident, to be very clear, I'm not confident. It may be that I give it a few games to get a little feel of unlock more stuff, because one of the things that they did well is there's a ton of stuff to unlock, and you will not unlock it all. And so the idea that I'll continue playing after I'm done to continue unlocking more stuff. Maybe I play with my kids because I know my son has been looking at this and wanting to dive into it with all the dinosaurs on the table. They love the Netflix Jurassic Park show, whatever. So he might want to play with me, and maybe I'll get a few games in with him as I unlock more stuff as we dive into the world of Jurassic Park together. I can see myself doing that for the sake of playing with him. But I think that the complexity of the puzzle that Jurassic Park gives me, the Jurassic World gives me, I think it's decent and I think it's enjoyable, but it still feels like a legacy game in the sense that I think I'll be less motivated to dive into it without having more unlocks, more objectives, more story, more character stuff around the game. I'm not confident of this, and this is one of those things that you can check the description down below. I'll have a link at some point in the future to follow up thoughts or whatnot. But I could be wrong. My opinion as of right now is that I am likely to finish the 12 games, play a game or two with my son while we unlock a few more things, and then call it a day. I do not imagine I will be keeping this forever. Keep in mind, that is an opinion that I'm giving without having played all 12 games, so take it from the context of being 7 games in and not a fully certain opinion. Which brings us to final thoughts. I like Jurassic World a lot. I do. I am really enjoying my time with it, and I think the biggest thing I can say to its credit is my original game plan was to power through 12 games in 7 days and call it a day, so that I can give a fully comprehensive review. And I decided I didn't want to ruin my experience by doing that. I'm having fun with it, I'm enjoying with it, and the pushing myself to get another game in was starting to affect my opinion of it. There are degrees of escalation in the game. Again, at least 2 points in my 7 games so far, I was like, whoa, things just changed a lot. Not just one small thing, but a lot. And there's impacts, and there's consequences, and there's the way you build out the island, and the more stuff happens, the more the management enters play. This is a game where I don't think you can even really consider it a fair opinion of the game until you start getting to your 3rd or 4th play, and really I'd recommend getting to your 5th or 6th play before you really start to develop a stronger opinion of where you are with it, which might be more than you want. If you're sitting there saying, hey, I don't get to fully experience the game until 6 games in, honestly, I probably am going to have to say that again when I play another 3 games, whatever it is. I'm going to have to continuously evaluate my opinion as more and more things get unlocked. So I'm not willing to rate it right now because I don't know where I end up with it. I will say that every game has made me enjoy it more, which is part of the problem. Every game I've enjoyed it more. I'm 7 games in, there's 5 more to go. I don't know how high that enjoyment track goes. I think it's probably midway through, in terms of how I was ranking Legacy games, maybe I'll do a video ranking my Legacy games next week, all the Legacy games I've played, I would say it's probably in the middle, maybe slightly higher. Games like My City are below it. Games like Pandemic Legacy are still at the top. It's probably right around Rise of Queensdale as far as my personal enjoyment. I'll have to actually put together my Legacy games and think about it, because I don't know offhand. But I really enjoy Legacy games to begin with. I haven't finished all of them. There's been 2 games that I didn't fully finish. I got close to them finishing, but not really. But in terms of Jurassic World, I'm enjoying it. I'm having fun with it. I like it a lot, but... And the but is the price. Because this one is coming in. On Kickstarter, it's going to be coming in at around $140. In retail, I don't know. You can check it out down the road. $140 is with shipping factored in. That's not a cheap Legacy game. That's twice the price of buying Pandemic Legacy online. Rise of Queensdale, which is where I think it's equitable to. I believe Rise of Queensdale is around $90 or so. Maybe $80, I don't remember exactly. Then you have games like My City, which I think My City started off the same lightness as Jurassic World, but My City never escalated as much as Jurassic World did. My City comes in at like $25, $30. If you're just comparing Jurassic World as a Legacy game in its own right, I really enjoy it and I really recommend it. If you're also taking into account the price, that's where I start to shift into, this is probably still worth picking up if you particularly like the IP. But if you don't particularly like the IP, then there are other Legacy games that are available for a cheaper price point. I don't heavily talk about price point in reviews. I talk about price points in a lot of videos. In reviews, not as much, because I kind of separate the content. But this one is expensive enough that I think it's worth touching upon. I'm really happy that I've been able to enjoy this one so far. I'm really happy that I got to dive into it. And I'm really happy that I'm enjoying it enough that I decided to not finish rushing through it so that I can enjoy those last 5 games more peacefully, without less pressure on me. But it's also an expensive game, and so factor that into your decision. I recommend it, with that asterisk. As far as other game recommendations, while we're on the subject of price point and other game recommendations, My City is going to be a great intro Legacy game that runs a little longer than I thought. It's one of those times where you realize 24 games might be a few games too many, but I really enjoyed it, and it's one of the cheapest Legacy games available out there. It's a great way to dive into the world of Legacy games and see if the feeling and general impression of unlocking stuff is for you. And then the game that Jurassic World feels most similar to me in terms of the it's cooperative versus competitive, so it's different, but Rise of Queensdale. Rise of Queensdale has a lot of board unlocking and a lot of escalation across the games you play, a lot of constant changes to the rule state and the way things progress depending on what happened. I really enjoy Rise of Queensdale. The biggest difference in terms of these 2 games is one's cooperative, one's competitive, but in terms of the sense of escalation, I think that Jurassic World and Rise of Queensdale are most similar in terms of the Legacy games I've dove into in the past. And that's it. It's a little bit of a harder review to give because of the nature of Legacy, and also not having finished said Legacy. So it's a partial opinion, but I've played this enough that I am very much enjoying it, just with caveats and asterisks and things you should be mindful of before you decide if this is a game for you. Until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you found this helpful, and as always, have a good one.